Carroll's in E62 Media and working my way through the watch list. And once again, I am focusing on players that I think will be probably late third and later. I'm going to start with a transfer, a Division 2 FBS transfer. And some of those have certainly worked out tremendously in the past. And this is Lawrence Hattar, who was an all GLIAC conference player at Ferris State and an All-American previous to his transfer. But even prior to transferring, he played against some top-level competition. He was at in a game against Bellevue High School in Michigan when he was in high school. Faced Damon Payne, who was considered a five-star at the time, and handled himself well against him. He's 6'4" and change, probably about 315 pounds, maybe a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit heavier. I know he's been listed as high as 335. Maybe that's what he weighs. I'm inclined to think he's lighter. But if he is 335 pounds, if he is closer to 6'5", that helps him. He may end up kicking inside. Another D2 to FCS transfer offensive tackle I think is intriguing to me is former Valdosta State, now Appalachian State offensive lineman Will Flowers. Now, Will Flowers is another player that may be asked to kick inside. He's played both guard and tackle in his previous career. He's probably maybe 6'3", maybe slightly over, somewhere between about 284 and 292 pounds, probably somewhere in that range, but could clearly put on more weight. Very good in the run game already, with the potential to grow, obviously, into a very substantial, I think he'd be a successful pass protector as well. And, I mean, he's more than sufficient, but I think it could go from being solid or good to actually becoming a full-on strength as he continues to develop and grow. And working through some other players that I truly think have a chance to make an impact. Brock Bethea at Rhode Island, University of Rhode Island. Started at UTC. Chattanooga was a moccasin, and then made his way over to the Rams. He's had 25 starts at Rhode Island and moved to left tackle prior to last season and thrived. Was all Colonial Athletic Conference and made also the All New England team. Has a chance to be an All-American this year. And obviously, don't know any of his physical testing numbers. That'll be the big thing that'll decide it. But Malik Grant had a great year last year, at least in part because of his work, and he was an able pass defender. I'm also, I'd have to mention, almost by law, right, that Monmouth has a player in JT Cornelius who I see as being a future NFL prospect. First of all, he's one of the best offensive linemen in the Colonial Athletic, and the Colonial Athletic actually had a good offensive line group last year. And he comes back, right, as a fifth-year player. Last year had 12 starts, was a big part of the best offense in the whole FCS. Terrific offense. If you haven't watched Monmouth football, do it. They always have good wide receivers. They've lately had good running backs to go with it. And of 478 pass blocking snaps last year, he only allowed a sack. One. And 7 pressures. He's very refined. Like, often people assume that players are raw simply because they're playing at the FCS or Division II level. And I come by here to tell you that is incorrect. But just like Lawrence Hattar, who I think will be drafted somewhere in the middle rounds, I also think he has a really good chance to be drafted in the middle rounds. Remember the name JT Cornelius. I'm also a big fan of Southern Utah's Colin Gardner. Once again, Southern Utah's put recently offensive tackles into the NFL. This is another guy who I truly believe somewhere in the 5th or 6th round should hear his name called. Once again, I want to make it clear, there's no physical testing numbers. All the heights and weights are estimated or coming off of rosters, which can be wildly inaccurate. And most important, nobody's been physically tested by the NFL. But 32 career starts, had a really good season last year, was all conference. And I think if he continues on this upward trajectory, like I said, another player that I think will end up being drafted. Someone I am just digging into, so I know a little less about him. It is full transparency. I've only just started watching Netinho Oliveri from Penn. Now, people always bring up Ivy League because even within the FCS, it is not the highest of the levels. especially at some positions like offensive and defensive line. However, let me say, this is a player who anywhere in the FCS and several places in the FBS would be able to come in and play. Has played 18 games at left tackle, and once again, Malachi Holsley, who I truly believe is an NFL prospect as well. That running back at least benefited from having him there. Was a once again amongst FCS offensive linemen, amongst those being rated for pass blocking, he was top 5. Now, once again, PFF college is not perfect, but I would agree that he's one of the top 5 or 6 to 7 offensive linemen in terms of pass blocking I saw at the FCS level, and I'm just digging into him. So I'll have more on Oliveri later, but came onto my radar later last year. The offensive lineman within the Ivy I was the highest on previously, though Oliveri may pull ahead of him, actually was Michael Bennett at Yale. Had a terrific 2023 and finished out that season strong, had been a depth player or a big contributor, but wasn't a starter until later in that season, later in that season. And made all Ivy, honorable mention, despite only starting about a little over half that season. And then last year, I thought he was the best, maybe the best pro prospect in the Ivy Leagues, but he wasn't, in that draft. It's only one of the best if he had come out. And now, coming into this year, has a very good chance to be the first Ivy League player off the board. There's only one of them. And like I said, Oliveri is, I'm digging more deeply in him. I'm liking him more and more and watch. Another player within the Ivy League that I think is sort of sandwiched between the two is Delby Lemieux. Once again, first noticed him back as a sophomore in 2023, and you rarely see red shirts in the Ivy. First, you never saw them. At one point, I think the Ivy used to have a rule against red shirts. Now I think they've relaxed it, but they're still unusual to see it. But going back to then, once again, he was another person that became a starter in the down the stretch. I think the last 7 games of that year, made all Ivy, and then was an All-American for a lot of people last year. Not everybody across the board. I think the Football Coaches Association didn't have him as a FCS All-American, but some of the other ones did. I think maybe Don Hansen might have. But the point is that he was all Ivy, obviously, and was the AP on the AP's version of the FCS All-American, was their first from Dartmouth since 2021. In 300 pass blocking snaps, not a single sack, 9 pressures, and was number 7 by PFF College in terms of their FCS and offensive lineman, number 1, obviously in the Ivy. I'd be shocked if he's not drafted. Once again, in holding in abeyance, we don't know how he's going to work out as in terms of his physical testing. Another player that I think has a chance to be drafted, and it helps that he's on a really terrific football team, is Quentin Christensen of South Dakota State. And Christensen, of course, is on one of the the deepest and best programs of its type in the entire country, right? I mean, there's no two ways around that. Number 69 in your program, number 1 in your hearts, or maybe some of your hearts. Spotted him initially when I was watching another player on the offensive line a couple of years ago at South Dakota State, because they always have terrific offensive linemen. And listed at 6'5", listed at 300. I actually think the 300 is probably just a couple of pounds off. He's probably upper 290s. It's a 6'5", 6'4.5" probably, but really good movement skills, and I think he has sufficient length. Had played some tight end previous, right? You always like that when a guy was a good enough athlete to start his career at tight end, then outgrows that position in 2023, moves up to the offensive line. But saw him a little bit as a special teams player back back in his days, starting, once again before he even made the transition to playing purely as an offensive lineman. And then last year, as a full-time offensive lineman, plays 15 games at left tackle, and just helps every part of that offense. Made the honor roll also, so a really solid student, 3 years in a row as an academic honor roll student as well, and one of the commissioners award for academic excellence. So, well-rounded person, right? And once again, just does it all at a high level. I won't say he has no holes in his game or no problems in his game, but all the components are there. I'll put it that way. If he doesn't end up being drafted, he'll be a priority undrafted free agent. And then Seth Anderson is another one of those sort of slightly undersized. And I say undersized, in quotes. Started his career as a Bison. Now is at North Dakota. I'm sure that drew some ire probably. But the fact that we're talking about a player that, in his career, saw going for his 2 years back at NDSU, saw some time. Though he wasn't a starter, but he played against Eastern Washington a little bit in the playoffs. Was a player that also competed in basketball, track and field in high school. So good all-around athlete. Then when he gets to North Dakota, immediately becomes one of the best players on the team as a redshirt sophomore, redshirt junior. And I would say, looking at him now, like what he has a chance to be going forward as a fifth-year player, the thing that sort of stands out for me, is that one is healthy, right? Staying healthy. He is a player that 7 games played in 2022, 12 games in 2023, 12 games in 2024. So has not missed games due to injury. That's something that I think you look for as well. Once again, you like it if he was a little taller, you like it if he was a little heavier, but he has the movement skills. I wouldn't just automatically, just in my head, say he's a guard just because, he's a little smaller. And once again, I think we've seen that you can be 6'4", you can be, especially if 6'3" usually ends up being a little more of a challenge, but you can be 6'4", you can be 6'5", and be successful. Moving on. Another offensive lineman that's coming, out of the FCS, or it's not, still in the FCS, but I think has a legitimate chance to be an NFL prospect, is Gavin Ortega of Weber State. Things about Ortega, once again, just really, really, really consistent, right? And there are some positions where, you look for flash or upside or, pop or whatever. What I think, one is he has great knowledge, right? I think people sometimes realize that when you look at NFL football teams and you say, where's the 3.0 and above club? Quarterbacks sometimes, but on most NFL teams, the position group with the highest college GPA, not all the time, but most of the time, is your offensive line group. They are academically often the smartest players on the team. But Bellingham, Washington native, has had opportunities, to move, to be on another team. I know, not for a fact, but I heard whispers that there were teams in the Pac, however many it is now, and teams in the Big 12 and a few other places that were interested in trying to bring him on. And he, has decided to stay with his current situation. And was all Big Sky. Made some All-American second teams or honorable mention. Frame will not be an issue, right? He's listed at 300. I actually think he's heavier. I think they're shortchanging him. I would not be shocked if he's more like 312. And once again, the 6'5", maybe 6'4 and a half, 6'4 and 3/4. I'm not too worried about that. But saw the field at left guard. There's not a position I don't think he would be unable to play. Sort of like Cody Whitehead coming out of Kansas State. I think he could play all 3 positions on the line at a fairly high level. But I think that he's got a very strong chance also to, if not drafted, definitely make an NFL roster. And before I wrap up with this offensive line group of guys that I think will be day 3 prospects, but will definitely make an NFL team, I'm going to definitely spend some time on Titan. First of all, Titan Flieshmann. I just want to say, that's first team, all name team, right? How can you hear the name Titan Flieshmann and not say to yourself, like, well done, parents, first of all. And the name is somewhat fitting. Once again, frame is not an issue. There's another player you could tell could carry 325, 335, maybe 340 pounds with not a single problem. Was a second team All Big Sky, made my personal first team All Big Sky. I thought he was one of the best players in that entire conference, though they had a good offensive line group. Like, I get why it was that he might not have been selected All Big Sky by others, but first of all, he's got for what looks like really long arms. Now, I know he's listed at 6'4". He may actually be slightly below that, but the length is there and it's clear and it's obvious. I still think he can play tackle. He might be kicked inside the guard, but in you know last year completely healthy. 2023 marred by injury, missed 5 games, but when he came back was really good. And I just think that even if you see him as a guard, at least give him a chance to show, play tackle first. He is another player that plays with power, right? He can move people. He can rock people. Played right tackle previously, but in 370 pass blocking snaps, 1 sack, and 10 pressures, really, really, really dominant as a run blocker. And I just think that worst case scenario, Titan Fleischmann, no, I'm going to say it. I think he gets drafted. I think a team at least thinks he can be a guard. Some teams may allow him to try tackle, but worst case scenario, if some team brings him in as guard, he's going to make a team. I think he gets drafted. Once again, I think he'll test well. If he doesn't, then he's an undrafted free agent. Once again, Bill Carroll, Team MBS, Bill Carroll for Zinni62 Media, and you'll see me again very soon. But I also do a lot of work for Team MBS Media. I do both. But this video is for Zinni62 Media. Please like and subscribe.